Good evening, everyone. This is the meeting of the Southborough Master Plan Committee, Wednesday, November 18th, 2020. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020, order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GL Chapter 30A, Section 18, in the Governor's March 15, 2020, order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place. This meeting of the Southborough Master Plan Committee will be conducted via remote participation to the greatest extent possible. Specific information in the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and/or parties with a right and/or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Southborough's website at www.southboroughtown.com. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so in the following manner: by finding the meeting on the Southborough website at southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time via technological means. In the event we are unable to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on Southborough's website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive records of proceedings as soon as possible after the meeting. So good evening, everybody. We're going to kick off tonight with Katura talking about objectives, goals, and recommendations for the schools.
Don't we have to kick off the meeting first?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry. Roll call vote. Thank you, Tom. Okay, so Latrell here, Martin?
Here.
Watson? You're muted, Judith.
Sorry, here.
Glazomitsky?
Here.
McKee?
Here.
Markelier?
Here.
LeVault?
Here.
Signs? Bill, Signs? Stivers?
Here.
Savidovich?
Here.
Signs?
Here.
Mills?
Here.
Very good. Thank you, Tom, for keeping me straight here. Now we will kick off with Katura in schools.
Okay, so now that it's official, hi everyone. So I have a document that that we're going to share, and as a little bit of background to this, as I had mentioned before, the way that I have been approaching the schools section sort of builds on the work that Roger Challen and Sam did last year when Roger was the liaison to this committee. And they did some great work coming up with a really excellent, broad-ranging, creative list of things that could be considered for the schools to put in the master plan as items that the schools can think about moving forward as far as contributions to the town and interaction with other town resources and other community resources around us. And then what I did was take that, and Roger and Sam worked on this before the school's new strategic plan was done, which was worked on last year. And so now we have that. And so I took that and came up with some additional items to put in the list, and also sort of reworked a few of the things that were on the original list, and came up with a document that is now on your screen. This was shared at our last school committee meeting, which was last Monday, November 9th. And the whole school committee was in attendance, and there weren't any real comments. I like to hope that that means everybody loved it. I don't know if it was just that there was also a lot happening that night, but But I do think that if there had been any major objections, we definitely would have heard that. And I think because this builds on the strategic plan, a lot of it is very familiar actually to the other school committee members. And then the items that aren't necessarily things that are found in the strategic plan or really elsewhere in the school's formal plans that sort of have to do with, you'll see kind of down below, there's a bullet having to do with, think about incorporating daycare or adult education, that things like that, that's not really something that has come up for discussion very often. But, my understanding of the master plan is to really think broadly and to think about, things we might want to include for future thinking in future years that we might not otherwise really have occurred to us without this process. So I am curious to hear what others on this committee think about this list. I feel like since this is the school's first sort of foray into this, the others in this meeting might have a better sense of, what types of things really belong in the master plan and belong on this list. So, any feedback like that is obviously welcome. And any feedback at all in general. So I don't know if would it be helpful if I just sort of went down the bullets, or should we just pause for a couple minutes and everybody can just read it?
I think going down the bullets would be helpful.
Yeah.
And it's not a very long document, so it's
it's not long. Okay.
And then you can kind of explain, why, where you came up with it and why that's there as a goal.
Why each one is there. Sure. Okay. So the first one is really more of an introductory bullet that speaks to, the strong educational system that we have in place, and that the goal would be to, continue that basically, and to continue to strengthen it as we go, which I think, we've seen in action really is happening in the schools. The schools are really getting, they get outside recognition fairly often, and, do well on, not that testing is everything, but we, have had great success with MCAS testing and all of that. So that's the first bullet. The second one, continue to operate education programs and services that set the town schools apart from other local education systems and maintain a best-in-class reputation. So we see that when we look at all of the programs offered in the high school. Also, all of the, we have some really excellent special ed programs that we offer. Our arts and music programs are very strong. And, I could go on, but there's a lot of that. Execute the district's strategic plan using skilled management practices and best educational practices. So this bullet and the next several bullets really come right from the strategic plan. Again, I don't know if it's, I'm interested in feedback on whether we all think that that is something that belongs in the master plan. It certainly does represent what the district is going to be focusing on over the next few years. So, it can certainly be in there and it's certainly accurate. But again, we're open to feedback as to what exactly, belongs in the master plan itself. So the strategic plan also speaks to the next bullet: implement instructional practices that engage all students in developing and demonstrating their knowledge and skills through rigorous, innovative, and relevant learning experiences. There's a great emphasis in the schools on providing practical learning experiences for students. For example, one of the things that comes to mind is one of the focuses in the school improvement plans these days is communication and students' abilities to, express themselves well, to do that with all levels of individuals, to be able to engage with adults, with peers, to do public speaking. that type of thing, just as one example. Provide all students with access to challenging and culturally responsive learning experiences that meet their individual needs. So that goes to basically how the entire curriculum is tailored, and to incorporate culturally appropriate materials, and to make it differentiated so that it's challenging for each individual student. Prioritize social, emotional, and physical well-being of students. This gets a lot of attention within the schools. There's a lot of social emotional learning, SEL, that's very much emphasized starting from the younger grades on. So for example, at Finn, there's a very strong SEL program where students are specifically guided through, learning all of those social skills of, respect, compassion, empathy, all of that. And that carries forward through all of the schools. And one of the things that's being looked at right now is coordinating all of the SEL learning that happens in the different schools, and just paying attention to make it consistent across all of the schools. So there's some strong programs in each school, but we're working on making that a little more coordinated even. Demonstrate continual growth through professional collaboration. The district puts a strong emphasis on professional development. We have, allocated specific days for the teachers to engage in professional development throughout the year. Anytime there's really an opportunity to enhance that, that's something that the district does. For example, at the beginning of this year, these are unusual circumstances, obviously, but the state made it possible for districts to allow for extra professional development days. And that certainly did happen. And there's also a strong program right now in the schools of instructional rounds, where the teachers go around and observe other educators within the district, and they learn from that. And it's a sort of a formal program that's been put in place that's been very helpful. The next one is develop, support, and operate sustainable, functional, and well-maintained school buildings and facilities, including maintaining a sound capital plan consistent with the town's capital planning. This is something that's actually in the strategic plan, because our physical spaces are so integral to what the schools do. And obviously that's something that's, important to coordinate and work with the town on. So I feel like that's definitely a good one for the master plan. Next is continue the district's focus on creating and delivering excellent special education programs. I mentioned that earlier, but that is definitely a strength of the district. And really, we make a great effort to make sure that each student is getting what they need in order to receive an education. And so that's something that, we thought might go in here. Consider options to incorporate daycare and adult continuing education programs. So that's one of those things where, and I know from listening to some of the previous conversations at these meetings, that in general, what the committees and areas of town are doing is really just articulating in the master plan things that they already do or that they're already planning on. And this is more like a document to sort of track things. This deviates from that a little bit, because I'm not sure that this is something, like I said before, that kind of comes up very often in conversation, but I think it's a good thing to sort of have in front of us. And, if we have the opportunity to think about that, if space, physical space allows for it, or, we end up having the bandwidth at some point to do some of these things, I think it's a good idea to keep in mind that, there are other options. Enhance relationships with all local education assets, including private schools and local technical schools. So, we do have Assabet Valley, which is not, it's an option for the high school students in our town. We also have the private schools, and there could be other opportunities for more coordination with those as we move forward. investigate and apply for external program-specific grants or other funding sources to enable the establishment or expansion of specialized instructional areas. So this is something that the schools already do, but again, it's good to keep it in the forefront. For example, I know that some of the grants that have been applied for have been for various types of technical instruction, certain equipment. I believe that there may have also, I believe there may have also been a special education grant or two that have come up in the last couple of years. And this is a little different, but we also, this goes back to the capital planning bullet. There's also the Massachusetts Building Grant Authority, where we just use that to replace the fin boiler. And we also plan to, tap into that and apply for more grants to keep the buildings operational. Okay, look for opportunities for, I think that should be for coordination with other schools, colleges, universities, and businesses. Again, I think this is another aspirational bullet point, but not a bad one to have there. If there are other opportunities to come up with, opportunities for the kids, for the students to have new experiences that would involve working with other businesses or local schools. And then collaborate with the town to consider building and operating an integrated structure of lifelong learning, social engagement, recreational activities, and other community activities to enhance the town's sense of community. So this last one would obviously be amazing. I think this, this more speaks to having an actual facility that where the town could, the schools with the town could offer, and I think also working with the rec department, sort of an integrated program of activities that we don't necessarily offer now, but if we had the space and again, the resources, that's something that we could consider. The schools already do coordinate with the rec as a rec department, as Kristen knows. But this would be sort of to enhance that to a larger scale and to expand it. So that's sort of an overview of some of the things, and I'm open to thoughts.
Can I make a comment, maybe?
Yes.
Maybe he's on mute. Okay.
Of course.
I think this is great, Katura. This is exactly where I think Roger and I originally had hoped it would go in terms of integrating with the school's planning work that was not fully formed when we did this originally. And so it's a great combination of things that I think are important for the schools and school committee, which is a critical factor for success here to get everybody sort of pulling in the same direction. And it mixes in, I think, as you're suggesting, some longer term things that we certainly can't afford now or have not been actively discussed. But I guess we saw this as a way to feather in a few things that are much farther out, but to, again, begin socializing the idea a little bit, to get people talking about them, thinking about them. And one of the things that I think is pretty exciting here is to think about the schools as I see it as a sort of a central integrating role. And that I think education is a key motivator for many people, whether it's for their children or for themselves or senior citizens or whatever. If you could build around an education theme, include things like recreational activities, resources, other town services, other local activities, services, et cetera, I think the schools have the infrastructure to make that work better than any other organization that we have in government here. And so I think I'm willing to bet that if you take yourself out 20 or 30 years and look back, I think you'll see a lot of organizations, a lot of communities moving in this direction. With varying speeds and to varying degrees, but it's the kind of thing that the old saw says that if you don't have a destination, any road will get you there, kind of thing. I think this is in my view, establishing a sort of broad, long-term destination that will begin, I hope, to suggest more and more strategies and activities as people think about it and convince themselves that this makes some sense. So I think it's a great idea to get it in here and don't necessarily focus or spend money on the longer term things near term, but continue to talk about the idea and think about ways we can reinforce this year to year going forward. And we may wind up 10 or 15 years down the road saying, wow, we've done a lot of this stuff because we simply had it out there for people to think about, and it's a pretty compelling idea. So I think it's a great step in the right direction, and I think it's a great piece for the master plan, and we may want to flesh out more detail in some of the ways here, but I think it's a great step forward. So thank you.
Okay, good. Well said. I like your perspective. I think that's very helpful to hear that. Yep.
Tora, I also have a comment, just, regarding, these bullet points about social and emotional education. I have two very, very small kids. I have a 1 and a 2-year-old, and I live in a neighborhood where, there are also a ton of small kids. And I think, in talking to, my neighbors and people that I come across who are also kind of in the same phase of life that I am, one of the major concerns that I think parents have in a post-COVID world is the early socialization of their kids. So I think, these bullet points about, once kids get to a school age, having the focus be on social and emotional education. And I know, the last bullet point on that document was about, how we can utilize our schools to make it, more of a lifelong learning process. And I think where we are right now with COVID, and who knows how long these restrictions are going to be. My kids were super active prior to COVID and, received what I would think would be adequate socialization, is just not a reality now. And I think that, using the school system or trying to create programs for even younger kids, that can be subsumed under, an educational premise and not necessarily subject to all of the restrictions and lockdowns that private businesses are. We have Kinder Group here, and we had all these wonderful resources for kids, but, now things are, fully on Zoom, and, you don't quite get the same kind of interaction, or I guess necessarily more importantly, the same structure you get with a, fully vetted educational program. So I don't know what the timeline is on, implementing some of these things, but I think that it's not necessarily something that can even wait a few years. We have kids who are being born into a post-COVID world who are not going to receive anything even close to what, normal socialization would have been prior to COVID, and by the time that they reach a school age, will already be so far behind. Does that make sense? So like I said, I don't know what the resources are. I say this every meeting. I feel like a broken record. This is my first go around with you guys. I don't know exactly how, to go about making this more of a reality in the short term, but I think it's actually a really, really important thing that we may not be able to see the full importance of right now, but by the time these kids get to be school age, we may see like major issues in their emotional and social development.
Yeah, so I think, one of the things that the school does offer is a preschool.
Yeah.
So I think what you're talking about is making sure that kids have access to preschool to a large degree, and and then far down the line. And I don't know that this is something that the schools are in a position to focus on at this particular moment, given everything that's going on. But I agree, like an early learning center type of thing that, we see at some of the other schools, and maybe incorporating that and offering that as an option to parents. But the preschool is there now and operational from age 3 up, I believe. And I also know that the schools are very focused right now on making sure that they're attending to the the social and emotional needs of kids as this is happening, and also, are going to be have an eye out for that going forward too, once this is over. And, kids are, nobody's life is normal right now. So everybody's experiencing impacts, and that is definitely something that's on the school's radar.
So do these preschool programs I guess my concern is the bandwidth that these preschool programs have. Preschool isn't necessarily a mandatory thing. There's not enough spots, obviously, for every kid in Southborough to go to preschool. And I think that the way parents kind of got around the preschool benefits was to enroll your kids in other things. Like I said, we had kinder group. You could, do gymnastics and play groups and art classes and music classes and all of these things that I guess in a de facto way kind of took the place of that early socialization that preschool would have provided. So that's more what I'm saying is I'm aware of the preschool, and I hear absolutely wonderful things about it. I don't know that that's necessarily a broad enough solution to what I anticipate is actually going to be a kind of major problem. We don't have kids socializing anymore. It's kind of a crazy thing that, COVID did to everybody.
Yeah.
So that's my concern.
I agree. I know.
Yeah, good point, Gina. And again, I think that this process started before COVID. But it's sort of interesting because as I observe what's going on, there's another angle in terms of, I think, work structure, family structures are changing and may never recover back to pre-COVID, in the sense that we're getting more and more families that had two working parents, which creates pressure on childcare. So if the school system ultimately can step in and provide rich programs for preschool, daycare kind of programs, that takes some pressure off of families as well, in terms of dealing with, keeping up with the workplace, the work style, remote working, et cetera, et cetera. So again, this is a longer term deal. We certainly can't afford to do this in the near term, but having that model out there, I think, can not only benefit the emotional socialization development of kids, and not every kid certainly, needs as much of that as all kids. But you've got that opportunity there, the resources there for people who need it, can take advantage of it. And I think that reinforces, again, the value on a community-wide level, community connections and so forth. So I get pretty excited about thinking where that can go, but I get depressed thinking about how long it's going to take to get there. We'll pay for it.
Well, it's also, it's time, it's money, and it's also space. I mean, one of the things that we're looking at right now is there's for the capital planning committee, there's a schools research subcommittee, which I'm also on. And we're looking at, school buildings and, enrollment, in light of enrollment, and how much space do the schools actually need. And, the idea is to use just the space that we need, and not to, we certainly don't want to be swimming in buildings we don't need. And so it would require dedicated space to do that also, which is, I think, has a lot of focus on it right now too. So
that's an interesting point. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I had a question, Katura. I echo what Sam said originally. Great job. I think it incorporates a lot of what we're looking for the master plan. The one, though, that I think Sam touched on at the very end needs a little tweaking on some of them was the one that had enhanced the relationship with the schools, the private schools and other institutions in town. And I say tweak it a little bit more to be more specific on what you're looking for. As a member of, on the planning board, if there was something that would be specific that we could try to ask for next time someone comes before us, that they're how we could really ask for assistance with something, or if give directions to the selectmen as well as to, hey, we really need whatever. So I think beyond just whatever that relationship, building the relationship, I think there's a overall sense from the community that we need to do that. But what the need is specifically for the schools would be great.
Okay.
I'm going to add on to what Andrew said, and one of the bullet items, I think we have to elaborate on is the special needs education is the ask. I mean, that's a broad statement, and yes, we should do that to educate all our children. But what is this something in the master plan going different, above and beyond, or status quo, saying that we include that population?
Are you talking about the one that says continue the district's focus on creating?
Yes, isn't that just a standard operating procedure of the school?
It is. Well, it is. It is, although I do know that it's always being enhanced. Like, for example, one of the things that has happened since I've been on the school committee is that additional and the exact type of training is escaping me, but there's a certain type of training that teachers need to have in order to assist students with dyslexia, for example. And so I know that that has happened. And so now we have an even greater number of teachers who are trained to do that. And so it is always being enhanced and sort of built upon as we go. But I agree that this is, that's one of the ones, I don't know if that's from the strategic plan, but you're right. I mean, that's just one of the general ones, which is something that we do anyway. Maybe it doesn't belong in the master plan. I don't know, but it is something that we do.
I guess I think it belongs. I think we do a great job of that. I've attended a lot of school committee meetings, heard a lot about those programs, and I think we are very proactive and aggressive in terms of dealing with kids with special needs. And I think that's a strength of the school system. And so I guess, Katura, I would describe it, or Tom, as more than sort of keeping going with it, but continuing to enhance as we're doing.
I guess in my mind, I kind of like master plan is something that we want to plan, like something new and beyond. Like one of the things is adult continuing ed. I mean, that should be in the master plan, because if that could happen in the next 10 years. I'm trying to separate some of those bullet items with, I don't want to belittle or anything. It's like, that's your job. Do we have to put it in the master plan that you're doing your job?
Like what's that?
No, I agree, Tom, that's, you just said exactly why I don't know if this belongs in the master plan. This is what we do. This is the plan, but I don't know if it's master plan, so I totally agree.
Katura, we struggled with that a little bit, and sorry guys with my weird technical setup, but we have a few things when we get to rec with that, and we kept it, but changed it to maintain or continue. Like it's something that we do and it is our job, but we're going to continue doing. So I think it's worth having it there. It doesn't hurt. I get what you're saying. It's your job. Like, of course you're going to do that. Rec has tons of things like that too, but it's not bad stating that we're going to strive to maintain, whatever it is that we think we're doing very well right now.
Yeah, and we talk in the school thing about maintaining best in class, et cetera, there, which again, to me is a distinction that's important and is worth reminding people of. So it is in some sense, Tom, sort of doing what we're already doing, but yet you don't want people to lose focus on that.
Oh, and like I said, if that statement would included to develop a better relationship with the New England school, I forgot the name of it, on Route 9.
NECC, New England Center for
Yes.
Children. Yeah.
I thought that would be, like if you reworded it to say that, maybe explore a establishment of curriculum between the Southborough school systems and the New England Center of Children. I mean, that's, to me, that's master plan worthy. That's a great distinction, because we do have that facility and that program right here in our borders.
And I think we already do coordinate with them, as a matter of fact, in a number of ways. So maybe strengthen that relationship.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah. I would like.
You know what I think, Tom? I do think that's a good idea. Maybe what I'll do is go back and see if I can just come up or sort of because I did also work with Greg on this. And we can come up with a couple of maybe examples that, we could include, including blah, 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 so that it's, I agree, have a couple of specific things in there. So let me see what I can come up with when I go back.
Okay.
Hey, Katura, I have one question, and I apologize because I'm kind of balancing between a work thing and this right now. So I had to go off for a couple minutes. Did you address business continuity planning. So you made the point a few minutes ago about we have a committee looking at consolidating some of our buildings, right? But that doesn't necessarily work if, God forbid, we end up in another situation like this and we need space because students' desks have to be X many feet apart. I think this all hit us at work, at home, everywhere without probably a pretty solid BCP plan for a pandemic, right? Like none of us had really, I mean, I can say we hadn't really planned for it. So hopefully this is it, and hopefully we get through this and never experience it again. But was there something in there about business continuity planning? Because I think that should influence potentially slightly the work that the capital planning committee is doing, or committee.
Interesting. So that is not specifically in there. I imagine, we haven't gotten down to that level of detail in the schools research committee yet, but I imagine that would be an element of what we're looking at that would tie into the bullet where it's talks about maintaining the school buildings, including maintaining a sound capital plan consistent with the town's capital planning. So yeah, I can let me make a note about business continuity. I don't know just off the top of my head that certainly could be a factor that we would discuss in that. Yeah.
Maybe we could tie that into the municipal vulnerability planning activity, which was not aimed in this direction particularly, but this could be a useful element of that, another dimension that the town should consider, not only for schools, but for all facilities.
Yeah. Sadly.
What we need is 3 more public safety buildings for another $50 million. No problem.
What do you mean 3 more? You could fit 3 more buildings in that one building. Thing is enormous.
Fire trucks are very big.
That's that big.
Maybe we could put the children's play center in the public safety building because they're going to be safe.
Sure, yeah. Absolutely. I think that's a great idea.
I already asked the chief if I could slide down the fire pole, and he said no. So
reliability.
They let you do it.
If he ever says yes, please make sure I'm there.
Sam, as my kid says, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission.
Okay.
But that makes no sense because they let the kids do it at the old building. The new one.
They did let them do it at the old building.
Yeah.
My son was one of them.
Wow.
Ma'am, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Barely.
Yes, we hear you.
Can you get closer to the mic?
I can do that. Does what we've seen here tonight, does that adequately address this concept of sense of community that we discussed pretty extensively here almost a year ago, in your opinion?
No,
I think the last bullet item definitely adds to that, without a doubt.
to it, Bill, but I think some of the material I have to share tonight, after Kristen's gone through the rec section, I think we'll kind of prompt a conversation about that. So if you wouldn't mind holding that thought, I think that's a great segue into my little section later on.
Sounds good.
But I think the schools would play an important role in that dimension, certainly. Yeah. So there are multiple players in that process as well.
Well, they certainly consume a lot of resources, that's for sure.
That's spoken like a taxpayer.
Just like a taxpayer.
Anything else on schools? Thank you, Katura. That was really great and
Thanks.
started a
Thank you,
great
Katura.
conversation.
Excellent.
Great. Thank you for your comments.
So Kristen, do you want to take it from here on recreation?
Yes, I do. Can you allow me to share on the one that, oh, I think I can share my screen actually. Okay, on past ones I haven't been able to share, so hold on.
Yeah, you should be all set.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, here we go. So Rec has met on these, and I apologize. It's budget season at work, so I'm sure many of you can understand what that's like. So unfortunately, I couldn't get this out to you prior to today, but I will post this right after the meeting. Can someone confirm that they do see the Excel sheet up
Yes.
on?
Yes.
Yep.
Kristen, yes, we see it. It looks
And you
great.
make it a little bigger?
Mhm.
Sure.
I can see it, Sam. Thank you for that.
For me, Tom, us
Oh,
senior
well.
citizens need a,
It's at 150%. Is that, it's not actually getting bigger on my
And hey,
screen.
Sam, you know you can
Yeah.
do the drop down with the view
I know I can do the
options
drop
and
down,
make it
but
bigger.
I
Yeah.
can't do it,
Yeah.
but except in big leaps,
Okay.
up to 150,
All
200.
right.
That's okay, Kristen. Let's keep going.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I can't really figure out. It's not normally how I expand. It's not letting me do that, so I apologize, Sam. Okay.
You can do it yourself. If you hold
Right.
the control key and hit plus
Yep.
a little bit at a time, that'll go up in about 10% increments.
I'll give that a try then.
And I just expanded it as well to 125.
Thank you.
Okay, so what we did was we took the, I had really wanted to be able to like fit this into the cool Excel that Judith has, but I was having formatting issues. So what we did was we took the goals that were originally out there from 2016, we reviewed those, and then we reviewed the related objectives. And we certainly do have some updates in here where we refine things. And we also have some questions. One thing I already asked Mimi was, it was funny, we found ourselves reviewing these and we were saying, well, that wouldn't really be the rec department. That's outside of the rec department's control. And then we're like, well, wait a second, no, this is recreation on behalf of the town, not necessarily the recreation department. But we do want to make sure, I'm trying to change the wrong one. We talk about, at the end of the day, someone is going to be responsible for trying to see these through. So I do want to introduce that aspect to it. Might make a little more sense when we get into more discussion. So the first goal that we carried from the 2016 plan was improve and maintain quality and safety of all recreational facilities. And we definitely have some new objectives here. Oh gosh, they're screaming about bedtime happening right now. Please ignore. So the first was initiate a facility study to replace the 2017 study, as many of the recommendations have been or will be met in the coming years. We want to understand the impact of potential new developments, including Park Central. So many of you will recall that we did do the facility study, which was the foundation of a lot of the asks that we came to town meeting with a couple of years ago now at this point. And typically we asked him how often would a study be done? And he said, well, maybe every 10, 15 years. However, in this case, the facility study, we've actually met a lot of what they recommended, or we will be meeting in if all goes according to plan in the next 1 to 2 years. And so it might, that along with potential new developments and Park Central certainly could change the results of what a study would imply we need. So we think this is an important one to include, and we definitely took ownership of that one. I'll just pause there and see if there's any comments. All right, I'm just going to keep going through, and then you stop me if, hold on. I'm sorry, guys, I apologize, but I have to stop for a second. Hold on.
I do think Kristen's point is a good one in terms of distinction between recreation more generally and the rec department, because I do think we ought to be thinking in terms of, town recreation, that the rec department can drive the conversation around, but not necessarily would wind up doing or being responsible for all of it, at least in the near term.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As example, I see the next thing is the continued improvements to the golf course, which I think isn't in the recreation commissions.
So the rec
Bucket.
department has no control or no involvement in the golf course?
No direct involvement, that's right. We're working on a new golf course management committee that I fail to understand why we haven't already appointed, but there was a development committee that did a great job. And then those folks said, you know, that's not, we didn't sign up to help run it, we signed up to help develop it, and that job is done. And now we're looking for people who actually are interested in doing it. We actually have a couple of golf pros in town, as a matter of fact, that are trying to get interested in that. So
I'm the exact opposite.
Mr. Anti-Golf,
Same.
No, Mr. Lousy at golf.
Mr. Golf Amateur.
Not
Oh,
so.
amateur is a good word.
All right, guys, about that. And here I thought I stopped video and I don't think I did. So just some kid stuff going on. Okay, hold on one second. I'm sorry again. This is,
I understand.
yeah. Bedtime difficulties, right?
I can hear my husband's putting mine to bed right now, and I can hear the rumbles from upstairs.
It always makes me feel better when it's somebody else's kid because we've all been there. So thanks, Kristen.
I describe that as
I'm having
negotiation practice.
flashbacks to 20 years ago.
I know. You mean you don't go to bed before your kids?
Turn the lights out when you go to bed.
So I think my system froze up then, but so just let me understand the golf thing, Sam, or
Okay.
anyone else. So the golf course is a public facility, but it's not like managed by a staff department.
Yeah, we subcontract the management to a golf management company
Mm-hmm.
who manages a number of golf courses around the Northeast.
Right.
And so we pay them, they get the first cut at the revenues, and then if revenues exceed a certain amount, then we get a hunk of the additional revenue. That's the way it was done historically. Now, we don't have to do that forever, but that's the current model.
So think of yourself as owning a couple of rental properties, and you have a rental management company managing it. And then, like Sam said, you make money on it, but you don't have to deal with the day-to-day.
Okay, but who in the town appointed the management committee? Is
Board of
it
Selectmen hired them,
okay?
so it's our
So-
fault.
So can I apologize? This is crazy. When talking with Tim, the golf course apparently with the management committee. So this is one of those ones that we're like, no, this isn't a rec department. We can't have this there, but it may be a recreational goal for the towns. We didn't want to remove it, but we need to understand who would actually drive this forward, because we feel like it's out of the rec departments because it's under professional management. Apparently that's going very well and it's turning over a profit to the town. I don't think anyone's looking, and correct me if I'm wrong, to change that. So in that case, who would be the owner for driving this particular objective forward?
Yeah, there will be a golf course committee, which there was a golf course development committee originally. Once the course was reconfigured with the public safety building, a number of those folks resigned, and we're in the process of appointing a new committee to help manage the management company. And that hasn't been done yet. I'm hoping that'll be done pretty soon. So that
Okay.
committee will be responsible, but they ultimately report to the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
So presumably the first thing they'll do is look at the improvement recommendations and decide whether or not they're even viable.
Right.
Because I mean, I don't know what those improvements are, but I think Mimi called this out, is that the golf course is under a CR. So
Right.
unless they're very specific recommendations, it's that's going to be a interesting challenge for them.
I think it's pretty straightforward. There's conversation around building a putting green near the clubhouse, and there's an issue longer term as far as irrigation for the course. And I think all those work within the CR, for example. And then there's some other, pathways and fencing to adversely affect Andrew Mills's golf ball collection, who lives adjacent to the course down on off of Lattisquama, and gets too many stray shots in his backyard, front yard, or wherever. So it's
Hey,
good income, right, Andrew?
No, it's not really good income. I've lost a couple of windows, a couple of a couple of windshields and everything, but
Oh my God.
Can't
Hey,
sell the
fun-
balls.
Fun fact, I grew up on Valley Road where Stony Brook was, and we collected golf balls. Like I have crates and crates of golf balls in my garage from years of collecting, so I understand.
I will take some because I
Oh,
live.
I'll give them all to you.
Hey, Andrew, do any of those balls have Tom's name on him?
now there was one picture of like a guy's wife though. That I thought that was kind of
I use the balls that have that stripe around it. Like, you know, you could just go to those places. There's like hundreds of them. You just walk around, pick them up.
Yeah.
those are practice
So,
balls.
but-
Yeah,
but
those
you-
are driving range balls.
Judith, that's another kind of thing in terms of some of the safety aspects though. So no, I don't, no, I'm not aware of any major, reconfiguration or whatever in the works there. But anyway, but Kristen, while you were managing bedtime, we commented that this is, I think, the perfect example of the higher level look. Golf is an important recreational asset for the town. Doesn't necessarily fall under the rec commission or rec department, but rec certainly needs to, I think, highlight these kinds of things so we are sure that we don't miss any important aspects.
Sure.
Agreed.
So the next
And
one
I
we
think,
felt
for
important.
now, Kristen, I think
sorry.
it's fine.
Oh, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think it's fine just to have this with a question mark if we're going to have a golf management committee or whatever. I mean, I think that this is a similar challenge that we have with other recommendations. I mean, some of them are very obvious who's going to be responsible. Others are less so. And I think that's one of the, things we're going to have to work through as a group is who do we think the best department or committee it is that will own some, a number of these recommendations across the plan, because that then becomes the art of making this work, is making sure that those people know that they are going to be responsible and accountable for it. So
Right.
I think it's fine for now to kind of say it's not us. We don't think.
Okay, great. We have a few more of those, trust me. So the next one though is definitely ours, and this is following through on a commitment that we made at, town meetings. I'm sure many care to forget a couple of years ago, where if we were to receive the funding, which we have in large part for a couple fields, we just got done redoing DePetrie. It's great. Hopefully at the annual town meeting, we'll get the permission to do Calander. We're at a point now that we need to follow through on the field rotation which was kind of one of the factors behind why we were asking for the funds, because we weren't doing proper field care, we weren't doing proper field rotation, and therefore one of the key recommendations is you need to rest fields, and during those off years you do extra maintenance. So we feel we need to fulfill that promise, so we will implement a field rotation according to the recommended guidelines that we learned about every 4 to 5 years. And this is important to do, and we feel like we're in the position to do it. Unfortunately, we've kind of by default done it because some of our fields have had to come offline. And DePetrie, which was redone this summer, was barely used this fall, but we want to implement a formal plan for doing so. And that's just fulfilling not only what we should do, but a promise to the town.
I hate to be the same one with the school system. Same thing with this ladder. When I read it right there, it's your job. That's normal operating procedure. You got to rest the fields and make repairs. That's
Yeah, but it hasn't been done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's the key difference. It's never been done in the history of our
Is that a
field.
master plan? Is that a 10-year master plan item to do?
Well, some of these items are shorter term. I mean, and that was one of my questions. Like, we definitely have goals for the next 1, 2, 3 years. Do those belong here or not? But I think this is an important item
Yes,
that
I
we're committed to.
I think they do, and that's what I think. For me, it's a similar situation on the schools where there's things that are on a school plan. There's things that are more operational as opposed to strategic, but we still want to have them in there to make sure that
Water bottle.
and potentially being measured, and so that we can actually demonstrate that they're being done and being done well. And then there are things that are maybe much more strategic with big funding issues that might be on a 5 to 10 year horizon. And then there's the things in the middle that if we're not doing it now, this one for me would say, this is going to take 4 years before you cycle it round. So to be able to say, yes, we've actually now implemented it and achieved it. So I think it's a really good one to have in there for that kind of mid-range horizon.
Yeah, I agree, Judith. I think that to me, the issue here is best practice management of an important asset for the town. And we've not been doing that, as folks have pointed out. And while in some sense it is operational, on the other hand, I think it's in one way, my view is more strategic. You got important assets, you want to manage them thoughtfully, carefully, according to professional standards, et cetera, et cetera. And this is a good example of a place where we hadn't been doing it, but the Rec Commission is now on track for that. And I think that's a huge plus, and we ought to reinforce that.
It'll also guide our strategy, right? As we look at certain fields like Lundblad and figure out their future, we need to make sure that whatever we decide with fields, it supports our ability to do this.
Right.
I don't know what the next lines, but is there one goal in the master plan in the next 10 years to identify a new recreational parcel that we can develop as a playing field? Is there anything for that in the next 10 years?
Yep.
Okay.
I hope so.
Yep. This kind of goes along with the BCP planning, and to be totally honest with you, I added this post our recreation meeting. We decided within recreation that I'd review these with you and then we'd ratify them in the next meeting with a vote. And as I was building these and I was thinking about, and this kind of goes hand in hand with earlier comments, that the rec department's done an awesome job. I mean, phenomenal job responding to this situation, first starting with summer camp and now with the RAP programs. I mean, I really can't say enough about what they've done. And so thinking about that, I was like, you know what, we really should make sure that we understand what that plan is going to be. And I think they've got a lot of the foundation in the event we find ourselves here again. So they're able to pivot very easily. And again, I think they built the foundation for it. But I thought it was a good, you know, in light of our new world, something to put in there. Again, haven't reviewed it with the commission, but I did add it here for your comment so I could bring it back to them when we are going to vote on it. I'll just keep going if no comments are thrown out there. This one was one that was out there per your original, like there was some original drafted goals and we thought it made sense. Work with the BOS and EDC to ensure new development includes funds for recreation facilities. My only question was this, as I was writing it, it specifically called out residential development. Would we not consider this for commercial development, or is that not the standard because it's obviously not the same as families moving into town and to residences?
I would, I guess, because I think, again, a town with great recreational facilities is a draw for commercial development, for rental properties and so forth in many ways, particularly things like, you know, bike trails, walking trails and so forth, as well as, you know, playing fields for company softball leagues or whatever you want to do in that direction. I think that's an important part of the picture.
Yeah,
Definitely.
I'll second that as well. You know, from talking to our local businesses, they're looking for a lot of the same amenities that a lot of residents are, you know, to attract talent. They're looking for not only housing, diversity in housing to attract talent, but also, you know, this outdoor space, green space, trails, things for their workers to use as well. And, you know, the model that people are looking for is sort of that work, live, play model where they can work and also have nice space to be around as well. So I think that's a really great point.
Wish we could offer swimming in the reservoir.
Thought you wanted a community pool, Sam.
We'll get to the
I do.
pool. We will get to the pool in a second here.
Good.
Strive for multi-use trail and sidewalk systems to satisfy the community's walking and biking needs. So this is one that, again, before I sent my note to Mimi to kind of get guidance, we're like, well, we have no control over that, but we were looking at it semi-isolated from the commission and the department standpoint. But as a recreational goal, it certainly makes sense. We just don't know who would own it.
Yeah, this one, the Trails Committee and DPW on the sidewalks, we're actually doing a few things on the sidewalk direction, which is exciting.
Hey, Sam, where's the status of the bike committee?
That's a question I have for my friendly chairman. He's been pushing that one. I think we ought to do that, and I don't see any reason why we can't do that quickly. But it has not come up again. It's on my list for Marty. I'll ask.
This one, we really want to figure out, explore possible locations for dog park as the community lacks free space where dogs can run unleashed. Right now they're using the fields. Obviously there's a major downside to that. So they shouldn't be using the fields, but there is really a lack of space. So we would like to hopefully find a solution to that. This is the biggie. We still do want to install turf. Well, the next two are the two biggies. We do still very much want to install turf at the choke fields at Woodward. I won't go through all the reasons. Many of you sat through probably too many presentations on this, but we're one of the few towns now at this point. Given the spring, we've heard many people say that they barely played in Southborough because all of their makeup games, given the fall, all of their makeup games were in communities who had turf fields. We have the lights at Woodward. It would seem potentially that might become an area where we have a lot of our town centrally located, our town offices and whatnot in the senior center. So this is very much still a goal, one that we want to start pursuing. There's many steps to this. I mean, we've learned a ton about what this would take. So this is definitely a several years goal, one that we hope to take the first steps in starting next year, just in terms of design, but an important one for us to have out there.
May I ask what does it mean by turf? I think English turf may be different to American turf here.
Artificial grass, basically. So
Artificial.
I mean, at the most basic level, I mean, I've learned more about turf than I ever thought I would in life, but picture what you play on in indoor fields.
Okay. Yeah. Then that's definitely, because English turf is grass.
Okay. We can probably.
I'm guessing it's not grass. Yes.
Yeah, no, I can clarify that wording to your point.
I'm sure most people will understand it.
For all the other Brits out there.
English terms, as I understand it.
What?
But essentially 9/11 field, because 9/11 isn't even our field, right? We're leasing it, and hopefully things continue well there, but we need more. When it rains, we're out because you can't use any of our grass fields. So I won't go off on that. Many of you have heard me go off too many times on that, but it remains a priority for recreation. And then I think to the question asked earlier, yes, we definitely have in here the community center. I won't read through everything, but what was most important to us, we highlighted between the walking track, a large court. I mean, a lot of this comes down to one, consolidating, giving a senior center more space, giving recreation more space. There's not a ton in the South Union building. And then also hopefully having it located in, somewhat centrally. So we're accessing many other facilities, both outdoor and involving the town. And a key thing here is that we have access to courts and fields and whatnot, but we're very much bound by the school hours, in that times when some of this would be most convenient would be during school vacations or being during weekends. But in order to get time, then you have to hire, there's certain rules you have to follow. You have to hire janitorial support. It's just not convenient. You can't use it during school hours, so it's very limiting. especially to populations that, you know, may not have kids in school and would like something to do during the day. So this definitely remains key to us. You'll notice noticeably absent is the pool. We did talk about that quite a bit. And under, you know, Tim was able to offer quite a bit of insight. A pool is a expensive item to maintain that presumably rec would be required to maintain. And we live in a community where, especially during the pandemic, a lot of people installed pools. We also live around a lot of communities that offer pools, whether they be sports clubs or YMCAs. And it's not that common, at least according to Tim's recollection at the time, for a community itself to have a pool. Oftentimes it's those public, it's either the private clubs or public offerings like the YMCA that provide that. So we as a commission kind of agreed, because we do live in a community that probably does have a lot of private pools, maybe in comparison to other communities. So we did not include that at this time. I'll pause there.
Hockey rink.
Huh?
I think
There's
that's
the
a good
hockey
idea.
rink.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a goal should be getting more of St. Mark's time, because we don't get a lot on their rinks.
I know.
Yeah, it's interesting. So some of the data I'm going to share after this one is the qualitative feedback from the vision survey that we did back in April, May. And the number one response item was, we want a community pool. That was the top. You know, people were allowed to add free flow comments under both the recreation section and
that's really interesting.
The what have we missed comment, and I think there's something like 39 individual responses out of 316 are for community pool.
Well, that was also pre-COVID, so I wonder if that would change if we had a public forum now, you know.
Maybe we.
I know.
I don't necessarily think it would change that much. I mean, because I guess it depends where people are coming from, but I you know, most of the people I talk to don't see COVID as a longer term thing. It's something we're dealing with now, and in a couple of years' time, we'll have got past COVID.
And we'll be on to the next new pandemic.
COVID number 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
maybe
will have wiped out the town, or you know, the flood levels will be so high that the reservoirs will have risen, and
We don't need a pool.
most of the private.
Hey, I want to ask Judith, what was the date again of the survey? Because I thought I remembered it was post-COVID, because we even added questions like since COVID.
It was
You're right.
we pushed it out April 24th. April.
So
3rd.
it was post-COVID, right?
Yeah, thank you.
I mean,
Well, it was just as
Yeah.
COVID was starting to peak, I guess. Yeah.
but Kristen, to your point, it may have been after people started adding pools, you know, because in April we were still in the crazy point of view that this may end soon. So I'm not sure, but just adding that.
And the idea that just because the town has a lot of pools, I see a community pool as not just a recreation splash and have fun. It's also a lap pool, a dive pool, and it fits the gamut of the age range.
Yeah, it's a great senior asset. Yeah.
And then all the way through, you know, adults, senior citizens, et cetera, for the exercise of it. So when you say a lot of people in town has it and that's a reason not to get it, I don't see it that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and again, it's weather independent. So
Yes.
use it summer, winter, etc. So anyway, it's expensive, Kristen. I certainly understand there's maintenance, there are liability issues with it too. So it's not certainly an easy first high priority asset, but I think it's pretty interesting.
Does it go with the same idea you mentioned earlier, Sam, of if we put it into the master plan, you start the socialization of the idea?
Great point, Tom. Yeah.
Yep, I got another comment about that, but I want to see what else Kristen has here. So
Okay.
let's keep going.
Well, I was just gonna say, obviously, we're not the final determination what goes in, and I can take that feedback back to the commission and also see if there's any sense of cost from Tim on what we're talking about. But I definitely agree with your points on socializing the idea.
Mhm.
So, okay, come on. All right. This was one that was carried from what was already documented. We just slightly altered it. It said expand the availability of meeting rooms. We just added training rooms. And part of the reason why was that we've seen Tim kind of rearrange with facilities, the office, how the offices were arranged in the South Union building and freed up a room for training, and it was used quite a bit. So clearly there is need. Now we know that the new safety facility also offers training rooms, but it's hard to gauge demand given, we entered into COVID as it was opening. But certainly I know Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, they're always looking for places to meet. My husband was like meeting at Southborough House of Pizza with his troop on the top floor. The Girl Scouts were told by the schools they can no longer use the school rooms for whatever reason. So we think this is a worthy objective. So we just closed out on seek opportunities to expand recreational facilities. That was always obviously our big one. Maintain strong partnerships with committees and organizations throughout the town. I think this is one of those ones I spoke about earlier that maybe the prior objective said build. We feel like we have built, and this is just about maintaining. Some of the more specific objectives that we've been talking about, seeking a spot on the ADA committee. So none of our facilities are not ADA compliant, and certainly when they were built, they were ADA compliant, but since then rules have changed. And while we still remain compliant, we would like to strive to achieve the highest standards. And therefore, it's our thought that perhaps if we had a seat on the ADA committee, which I believe other organizations in town do, that would help us stay informed. Obviously, there's a cost that's involved with that. So, who knows, but we think it's worthy of putting on the plan. This is another one where Rec continues to have very positive partnerships with the schools. And what kind of drove this conversation was I think there was a line item suggested about expanding the, access to theaters. To our best of our knowledge, that need is met through the schools, especially Trotter, obviously, who has, a big theater there, and we do town meeting there, et cetera. And so we don't necessarily see the need for anything new other than we need to maintain what we have today. And so in the event a new school is constructed, we want to ensure that same access remains, i.e. perhaps that new building should include a theater, again, that we would have access to. But we didn't see the need to separate and say we need to find or build a theater. Let me pause there and just see if there's any comments on that one.
I think Sense of Community was talking about like an outdoor performance space initially, way back, pre-COVID, when we could be within 10 miles of each other.
We kind of asked if we felt like any user groups weren't having their needs met, and it didn't sound like there were. We also talked, were there any user groups that we weren't necessarily extending ourselves to that maybe had a need not being met? And I believe, if I recall from the meeting, we didn't come up with any, and that's why we didn't, I guess, kind of want to artificially put something out there. Like, if the demand's not there, do we really want to focus on it?
Yeah. And we do have outdoor spaces like the Youth and Family Services concerts use the facility over at Neary, for example, which I think works out pretty well from a size and suitability standpoint.
In the Economic Development Committee, we put together some renderings last year, and again, this is all still very theoretical, but we looked at having open space that could be used for something like an outdoor theater, outdoor concert area in the downtown area. So that certainly aligns with that. And a while back, we had talked to some people on the Arts Council too, and you know, we talked about different partnerships for something like that as well.
Great.
Yeah, actually, community orchestra has moved out of town because there was no such facility.
So we'd definitely be interested in learning more about that. I didn't even quite frankly realize we had that, so that's good to know.
Well, the recreation department at one time was in charge of it. And when in fact the Trottier facility was so frequently used by the school committee for other purposes that they couldn't practice, they decided at that point in time to move out of the community over into Northborough. And all of the community concerts, etc., when they were being conducted, were now in Northborough and not in Southborough.
Wow, too bad.
Well, it could change if there was such a facility available here in town. And it implies, or it actually takes amateur musicians as well as potentially gifted students and allows them a performance venue, for example, which could do a great deal to provide a sense of community to Southborough, very much like the small rock bands and hillbilly stuff that goes on at some of the school facilities during the summertime.
Yeah. Good chance for me to get my old tuba out.
I'd love to see or know where, I'm sure I can find it online, where the community orchestra plays in Northborough, and I'm sure that's easily.
It used to be at the school. The problem tends to be now that I suspect in the future it will also be this way, is that until this whole pandemic thing is completely resolved, the schools are probably not going to allow adults, for example, and other individuals into their facilities.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. So I think, nope, it's not the last one, but I promise we're almost there. This is one that we've talked about. It's just strengthening our partnership with the Board of Selectmen and Open Space Preservation Trails Committee on the evaluation of potential property acquisitions for multi-use, I should say, purposes. So, you know, land is not a plethora of land available in Southborough. So when opportunities do come up, partnering together, see how we might make the most use of that land together. Obviously, you know, there's always an interest in fields, open space, as well as additional trails. I mean, this came about because there's always been a couple of specific properties in mind, but in general, it just seems like a good partnership to establish. And I'd actually probably add to that list the Southborough Open Land Foundation, even though it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
Almost last one. There was an item in the prior 2016 plan that alluded to us maintaining our budget, et cetera. It seemed, just given the nature of, you know, there's how the recreation department is funded isn't always well understood by the public. And so we felt like this blanket statement of maintaining a budget or whatever it was a little bit too high level and left some ambiguity. And, you know, we all know ambiguity down the line can lead to issues. So the rec commission hasn't had time to see how we discussed this, but how I reworded it. But we kind of wanted to separate out that we have a responsibility to maintain the revolving fund, but the revolving fund is only to be used for programming. And then we have the 9/11 fund, which again is specifically to support ongoing maintenance and eventual replacement of the turf field. Separate from that, every other user fee we get when teams use fields, et cetera, that always all goes back to the general pound facility maintenance and support, which is, by the way, then, and you know, most of the sports, the youth organizations also kind of contribute additionally to that through their own funds. So we believe this is important. It is part of our job per the last discussion, but just kind of important to mention because this has been a highlight the last few years, just the maintenance around all three of these. So we wanted to highlight that. We're going to continue to do that. I think Tim's done an amazing job in doing that along with Don Dumont, who's a member of the Recreation Commission. They've really done a really excellent job of sorting some things out, and we, we're committed to continuing to do that. And then last,
asked to make it a clearer cut funding. I guess what is your ask there?
I was actually carrying over, and let me see if I can find it. There was line item. This is the prior recreation objectives, and there was one that said fulfill responsibility to maintain a budget that supports programming and facilities. So that's a reasonable goal, but it just, given the nature of how the budget works with recreation, we felt it was a little too general. And so we didn't object to keeping it in there, but we wanted to get more specific in that we don't just have one budget. The budget that comes from the town is just salaries right now. And so we think it's important for people to start understanding the difference between the revolving fund, the 9/11 fund, our budget, and then what we contribute to the general fund. It's not straightforward, but if we're going to have a goal like that in there, which is fine because we just want to be a little more specific in terms of how that is managed or should be managed.
Is that something you could put online under, the page on the town website? Just an outline of how money flows through the department?
Sure, yeah. I'm sure we already have something. We've definitely had to present on it before. And then the last one, oops, it's not what I'm trying to share. Sorry, the screen sharing thing's in my way. Go away. I can't get back to my cell because of the screen sharing prompt. Well, the last one, I'll just touch on it, was around Trails Committee. And we think they've done an amazing job. They continue to do an amazing job. And so Rec does provide some support to Trails as well as the grants that they continue to get. There we go. I mean, they again, it's amazing what they've been able to do. So we didn't necessarily see a need to change that relationship, but we did want to make the association that we continue to be committed to working with them. So this was another one of those maintain. We want to continue to contribute and support to the Trails Committee at the level that we have been over the last several years. And that's it.
Good. Comments?
Kristen, I'd like to try to make clear that the ADA committee that you want to join, you'd certainly be welcome to do that. But when we have those meetings, they're public meetings and anyone can attend, including any one organization or any organization in town can attend and and present their issues or queries or whatever is appropriate. So I guess I'm not sure what your purpose is in trying to get a permanently assigned seat on that committee.
Well, I think the logic being, and believe me, we're not a group that is usually raising our hand saying, get us more meetings to attend, but it's been a huge focus and brought up, and it's important, and it's been brought up to us in many different ways and avenues, and whether it comes up in planning board hearings or just from a citizen coming to us that, as we understand it, the DPW has a seat in the committee, as do others, and it seems that recreation is a pretty prominent focus area when it comes to ADA. So we should solidify that relationship, I think, is the thinking, and rather than just kind of show up as an interested party, we have a very firm responsibility in making sure that we're complying to ADA regulations, and to kind of confirm that and our commitment to it, as DPW and other, I can't think of the other example, I'm sorry, that was raised, it would seem logical that we have a seat there, and then that's guaranteeing we're there, we're showing up, we're understanding things as they're evolving, we're committing to what needs to be done, we're discussing what needs to be done.
Well, it's perfect. Happy to hear that. In fact, you're being made sensitive to those issues. I don't think DPW actually has a seat on that committee, but we do have the town building commissioner, town building inspector, for example, does join for purposes of 521 CMR type of stuff. So, but in any case, we could certainly be willing to have extensive discussions on that if you'd like to.
That would be great. Thank you. We appreciate it.
Good. Kristen, I have a question. I think before you joined this committee in the Dave Candela period, we touched on an issue that I've always been interested in, is that I believe that there has got to be the ability to put together what I think of as the high-level view of recreational assets for a town of 10,000 people, roughly. It's relatively affluent. And, what is it that we ought to have in terms of a reasonable set of recreational resources, in terms of, how many little league teams should we expect to be able to field, and softball teams, soccer teams, and how many fields would we need to support that? And things like swimming pool, hockey rink, how many tennis courts, what does it look like in terms of a standard profile for that kind of thing, and where are we relative to that? I think that would be an interesting thing to understand and be able to communicate to the community. And again, for me, it's a socialization issue, because I think people don't generally have a very good feel for where we are relative to that. And so if you start building the picture, my bet is that we've got a lot of upside there in terms of things that would be normal to have for a community like this. And I think that could help, again, generate some broader based support for funding going forward. And I got to believe somebody like Tim, who's sort of been out in the world and this world and seen what other people are doing, could be very helpful in terms of putting something like that together. Again, at a high level, I'm not looking for a capital budget kind of thing, but what should we be thinking about? And I think I'd be very interested in seeing that.
I agree, and I think we talked about it a little bit last time. And one of the things I think I was floundering on was, but how do we know where we're going? Like, what do we expect the population to be as a certain segment ages out, et cetera? And I think, and I don't want to put her on the spot, but I seem to remember that maybe the schools have some data on projections for what our future population may look like, or am I making that up? Wishful thinking.
School population, yes.
Because we know.
I'm sorry, I was muted. No, we do get regular projections from an organization that keeps track of those things and gives us a general estimate. We found that those are not always very accurate. And actually, as part of this school's research subcommittee, we're in the process of getting a more tailored estimate. We've ordered a report, which we should be getting in January, which would give us a much better idea of Southborough specifically, what we expect enrollments to be.
Right. And I know that's not the entire population, of course, but it's when you talk about how many little league teams we'll have, that's obviously a key part of it.
Right. Just don't limit it to just that demographics.
No, of course not. That's what I just said. But it's definitely a big part of it. But I think that's the challenge. Like, we could tell you right now, today, November 18th, 2020, what should we have? What gets challenging? And certainly we've been challenged on in the past is what are we going to need by the time we would actually establish those facilities? So it's tricky, but not to be said it shouldn't be attempted. And I do think Park Central, and maybe I'm overinflating it, but I do wonder how that would influence things. And I think this starts to tie into another facility study, which we mentioned we want to do, I just question like the right timing for that, because as we look at Park Central, like, would that be, would that change the dial? And if so, do we want to wait before we spend that money to do that type of study to see the fate of that project?
Yeah, and I think, Kristen, that's a key point. Park Central, as I recall, I think it's roughly correct, might add another 1,000 people to town, something like that. At several hundred residential units there, apartments and condos and so forth. But the other side of that one is that we've got, last I heard, like 800 more buildable lots in town. And with the current zoning codes, you're not going to be able to generate huge numbers of additional residential structures out there, because a lot of those lots are difficult to build on and so forth, which people eventually can do maybe. But we're not going to, very unlikely we're going to wind up with 15,000 people, for example, with our current zoning code, and it's really hard to change the zoning code. So to me, at least, you can make a pretty educated guess that over the next 10 years or so, we might pick up another 1,000 people. And if Park Central hits, add another 1,000 on top of that. But it's likely pretty hard to go much higher than that, I would think, unless something very strange happens. So again, to me, there's a reasonable range there that one could think about in terms of number of people. And you've got demographic data out of the town census that you can look at in terms of aging population. We're getting older. So, you can have some reasonable boundaries there and say, this is the kind of range that we might want to think about. It's not going to be perfect, but it could be, I think, useful. So personal opinion, maybe you guys, Tim, has a better idea why it's hard to do.
No, I'll absolutely take it back. It sounds almost like a modified facility study. We don't necessarily need them looking at the condition of each of our facilities quite yet, but more, what do we have?
Yeah, and if we find that towns, in the 10 to 12,000 population size, have, half of the facilities that we have, that's pretty interesting. If they've got twice the facilities we have, that's also pretty interesting.
Yeah.
So.
Yep, agreed. I'll take that back to the commission.
Anything else on recreation? That was great, Kristen. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I have to apologize. I have to excuse myself for a work meeting. So Mimi, or maybe I could follow up with you with anything I miss. I will post this and
Thank you.
re-review with the commission based on the feedback, and then finalize our
And
submission.
Kristen, just to be sure
Great.
to come back from the commission with the approval for Tom's swimming pool.
Well, it's not up to us alone on what goes in recreation, that's for sure. So it sounds like there's definitely interest in keeping it there. So, I'll bring it back to them. But, again, I would assume it's not just up to us what goes in the section. So
We'll call it TSP. Swimming pool.
He's going to show up at the next meeting with his water wings on. Subtle.
Hey, I am French Canadian.
Ah.
Well, again, I apologize for having to cut out, but I'll catch up separately. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Kristen.
I can figure out how to get out.
And Judith, you're going to wow us with some more fabulous documents. Is that true?
Wowing. Okay. Let me see. Where is it gone? Am I able to share, Sarah? Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know if
you
Sarah-
should be.
Okay.
Yep.
hang on. Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Great.
Okay. So this is a 23-page document, and I am not going to go through every page. There's only a
Thank
couple.
you.
Can anybody else see her
I
screen?
can't see your screen. I can see you're
hang on.
starting to share, but
Okay.
double click.
What do I have to do?
I don't know. It seems to be paused. It just.
Double click.
Yeah, it
If
says
you
that
if you clicked on the little share tab there, Judith, the little share.
Done that. It says I'm sharing.
Interesting. Maybe stop and start again.
This is the encrypted version, high security.
That's
Only
right.
you can see it.
Very good.
Everybody got to stop streaming Netflix.
That's right.
Well, it may well be. I think this is the highest number of people we've had on the MPC for as long as I can remember on Zoom. So it may be
Really?
we're squeezing the pipe a bit. Not complaining. I think it's fabulous. Is that better?
Got it.
Yes,
There we
we can see it
go.
now.
Thank you.
Perfect, Judith. Thank you.
Okay, so if you remember in the last meeting, we took a look at the recommendations from the 2008 plan that we had either not started or were in progress, and we went through a kind of a detailed exercise to look at what did we want to carry forward into the new plan. And I've got all of that data kind of mapped out now, and once we get the school and rec final materials, then I can integrate all of that. This is like the sister project to that, which is I went back to the vision survey, which if you remember, we did in early April. The results came back. We had a report from the MAPC on May 29th, and there were two sections to it. There was the quantitative section, which showed the relative importance to the people that had responded to that survey of each of the different questions or the topics within the main objective areas. And then there was what I call a kind of a free flow section where we said to people, you can write your comments in here. And then there was another section right at the end that said, well, what have we missed? So that survey was very much modeled on the Vision Forum, the in-person forum that we had last fall, actually. And although the MAPC people had done an okay job, I think, in kind of representing the quantitative data, when they gave us the report, they literally just cut and pasted the qualitative data. So when you looked at it, you kind of go, oh my goodness, I can't see the wood for the trees here. So I've done an exercise to kind of reassign it in order to then say, okay, have we missed anything? And what are some of the key themes that are coming out? So this is a 23-page document that gives you all of that data. I'm just quickly going through it so you can see it. All of that data has now been reassigned under the correct heading. Okay, so, okay, I'm going to make this bigger for Sam.
Thank you. This is Be Kind to Senior Citizens Week.
It is indeed. Okay, so this is just some verbal. So I've created this as a formal document so that we can post it on the web so that if anyone wants to look at it, it's there. So, but what I did is I just took a quick look at the responses, and we ended up with 316 individual responses or comments across this range of our objectives. And you can just see how it's split out and what the most important percentages were. And for me, what was interesting was which were the topics that generated a lot of feedback and comment. And the two with the highest level of responses was recreation and accessibility and connectivity, which if you remember, that's where we've got things like road connectivity and traffic management and sidewalks. And then within those two areas, as I said a little bit earlier, the community pool or the ask for a community pool and interestingly, the downtown initiative, that's my wording there, have the most individual kind of responses there. And what was interesting was that a lot of those responses came from the what have we missed. So even though there was kind of some reference to it in the survey, it was people writing, in some cases, quite lengthy statements about what they felt was important. around a downtown, you know, a place where you could go and be downtown with shops and restaurants and a brew pub and whatever else sprung to people's minds. That was where a lot of the real kind of the fleshing out of people's interests was. So so all of the backup here is all of those comments individually kind of laid out. What I did then was just say, okay, I have 316 comments here. How do we try and put some structure around it? So what sorry, I'm just reading this thinking that doesn't make sense.
Too late.
I'm sorry, Judy. I was one of those people who wrote you a novel about what.
I know, and I found your comment, and what was really interesting was I found your comment, and it said, "I'm new and I'm really interested, and my name."
I know, and then I literally like found the
committee.
I was like, "I'm getting in here."
That was so cool that you were there, and like, yes, we have. So anyway, so these are the objective areas, and I'll just quickly try and summarize it, and then you can, you know, review it at your leisure, as we say. So on commercial diversity, and we took out the downtown initiative from commercial diversity and put it under sense of community, if you remember a few meetings back, because people felt that that was really important to us in terms of this idea of the community kind of coming together and staying together and a sense of, you know, gathering. So generally the feedback on commercial diversity was there is definitely positive support for smaller shops and restaurants, not the large change in the downtown, but also the other village areas. I just kind of called out there is a potential overlap between that objective and sense of community, but I think that's probably fine. And I didn't find any additional recommendations in those comments, because that was one of the things I was looking for as well. Have we missed anything here? Is there anything that really stands out? Diversity of housing was a really interesting area in terms of the comments. And I think you may recall when we looked at the quantitative analysis, it looked as though a fairly large number of people were not supportive of diversity of housing. But when you looked at the qualitative comments, there was some really positive support there. And Tom, this might be an area where you want to kind of dig into these comments a little bit in this format now. So there was definitely two groups. There was the first group of comments where people saw increased diversity of positive, specific requests around more housing options for seniors and young people and less restrictive zoning. The second group were either against further housing development, specifically no more 55 plus communities, no more large apartment blocks. And then there was several comments around affordable housing, and we defined affordable housing, I think, in the survey as relating specifically to 40B. And what was interesting to me as I read through it is that people are perceiving this concept of affordability in very different ways. So for some people, it means I don't want lots of 40B housing because it means that I'm gonna, Southborough will be, quote, like Worcester or Framingham. And then I think other people was looking at affordability in the sense of how can single people, whether they're single professionals or seniors, afford to live in Southborough because that's where they want to live and work.
So you know what's interesting about our survey, the MAPC survey, and versus the HPP survey? They were almost opposites.
Yeah.
I mean, in this one, the MAPC did have a larger participant by about 100 or so, but they were opposites.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have kind of an interesting thing here. I don't know where I came up with this, but as far as like affordability of housing, right? South Borough is a super expensive town to live in for sure. And if one of our goals is to increase affordability to live here without necessarily like building these gigantic apartment complexes or condos or whatever, or even going down the 40B route. What about like, I mean, and this is kind of weird, but like, like tiny houses.
That's all a part, and that's all part of that same solution. It's not apartment complexes. It's like changing. I think it's, and Mimi, you can correct me, but the zoning is restricted to have your elder parents have a separate, attached but independent part of your house to live there, multi-generations. Making some of these old houses in the MPP on Parkerville to make them condos instead of destroying the buildings, make them into 2 separate apartments and make them affordable.
Yep. There's
actually one on Woodland right now. It's a 2-family. It's right where Woodland comes in with 85. Is a great opportunity for affordable housing. It's 2 families. It's 2 condos. It's a nice piece of property and stuff like that. I think Southborough, we have to think outside the box in that.
Mm-hmm.
I think nobody's going to go for that, mega, public housing type of, but we have to think outside the box, smaller spaces.
Yeah, tiny
houses around, because, in the next 40 years, I might want to live on a single floor house that I don't have to cut my grass and maintain the house.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I'm making that a rosy picture 40 years, by the way.
So one of the things that I kind of, looked at when I looked at that section is, I don't necessarily think there's any additional recommendations, but we might just want to, and I know you're working with Sarah on some of this, we might just want to look at the specific recommendations in the housing section and try and almost like wordsmith them in such a way that it's really obvious that we're not talking about the mega apartment blocks and
And even in the the MPP, the master,
affordability plan.
Yeah, is we're not asking for any of that.
Right.
Asking for one of the things is, and I know this is getting a little off topic, is that I think they call it 40R, where you have the retail at the bottom and apartments, condos on the top. Or residents about that, the multi-living stuff around downtown, maybe around the railroad station and stuff like that.
Mixed use.
It's into affordability.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like you guys are on that. So
yeah, the MPP is, like I said, the MPP, which I think I shared with everybody on this committee, addresses a lot of that stuff. I thought they did a very well job, but it was very interesting in the 2 surveys. I mean, it was, some of the comments on the MAPC were like in stark contrast to the other survey that COGS did.
Yeah.
It almost seems like they had 2 separate demographics they reached.
Okay.
Now, did COGS survey, was that a targeted survey sent to certain people, or was it open to whoever?
Open to whoever. We gave them all kinds of lists. They actually did a lot of, I don't know if they interviewed you, Mimi, but they did a lot of one-on-one interviews.
Of course they did.
I don't remember, but I know they interviewed a lot of different committees, a lot of different agencies, and they try to reach out to all the distributions lists. We did publicize it and stuff, but what was interesting, the MAPC did hit about 100 more respondents than the COGS did.
We said at the time when we did that survey that it was, I think Matt confirmed that it was statistically valid, but obviously we don't know who answered it. Clearly a lot of people don't have their own pools. But
when you say statistically valid, and this is completely off topic, we're a population of 10,000. If only 300 or 400 people response, is that a statistically valid survey?
I
I don't know the answer to that, but that's a
that
question.
was my recollection. Matt Probst, is that how you say his name?
Yes.
He did the math on it and said it is valid. I mean, is the election of the town officials valid if only 0.2% or whatever it is the town votes? I don't.
I hope not. But I think you actually, Tom, have to have a little bit of demographic information around that. I think it could be statistically valid if the sample is generally consistent with the town's demographic sample. But if you had 100 or 500 people who were third graders or whatever answering, then probably not too representative. So you need a little more information than just the raw numbers, I think.
True. That was, like I said, I was just a general type of question.
That's a pretty good sample, though.
Anything can be statistically valid within degrees of freedom. So.
Oh Lord! Now you get way.
I know.
Way above my pay grade.
There are lies, damn lies, and statistics. Just
Exactly.
remember that.
So again, just quickly moving through, and hopefully everyone can read this. So, public services, resiliency in schools. There really wasn't that much in the way of comments on that, other than there were a few comments. There were only 6 comments related to the schools. And I think that's because at that point, we hadn't really fleshed out a lot of our school recommendations. Although there's a cross-referencing with the funding section where a number of comments were made relating to the fact that the private schools are perceived not to pay their way. That's that section. Accessibility, connectivity, the second most popular. Again, no topics there that weren't already raised. But it was interesting that there were a number of comments within the master plan. There's a reference to the Accessibility Compliance Committee, which I have to say, I can't find that committee is actually now existing. So, but we've got it in the master plan. So did that committee get started?
Not yet, but it should be.
Is that a should be as in I wish it was, or it's coming your way?
I think it's on the selectmen's list at this point. I'm puzzled as to why we haven't addressed it. I asked about it a couple of times.
Before or after bikes committee is established?
Probably after. I think, I can't remember, is that one where we have to have a town meeting vote on that bylaw bill? Do you remember that?
I don't remember that, to be very honest.
That may be the holdup. I can't quite remember, because we did do a new charge for the accessibility committee, and much more extensive than the current one.
Oh, yeah, that particular thing has to go in front of town meeting.
Okay, so that's a holdup, I guess,
Right.
since we haven't had a town meeting recently.
Right. Actually, the budget, some of the budget issues went through and it was consolidated, and then that last abbreviated meeting we had, but the next full town meeting has to address that issue.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We can kind of update that one. Open space and environment. There were actually a couple of points in there, and Karen, maybe you want to just take a look at the detail and see if you want to add anything in. Recommendation.
Yeah, I just made a note, Judith. Thank you for highlighting these about the 2 areas that maybe aren't in our current plan. Yeah.
Urban forest management, and then interestingly, the adoption of LEED standards, which was a survey, but isn't in our recommendations, I realized. And then
to my knowledge, there hasn't been discussion about that. So that's interesting. Yeah, good.
So recreation, again, the highest number of comments. I can talk to Kristen about cross-referencing what's in here. The community pool is definitely the one that was, stands out as a really popular item, and the dog park as well actually was in there. So what was interesting, I think, was for me was in Kristen's recommendation. I think the way I read it was that they are proposing a more comprehensive kind of community recreation facility that wouldn't just be for sporting, exercise type facilities, but would also include community meeting rooms, the extension of the senior center or whatever. Because that was definitely, again, as you read the comments, different people had different ways of expressing what they're looking for. And some people talked about specifically about a recreation facility. Other people talked about a community gathering place. And we don't, and so Bill, this was the point that you were making, and we don't actually have a recommendation about a gathering place. So, but I think someone raised it earlier. Oh, it was Julie. Is that community gathering place in effect, are we looking for the downtown rejuvenation, whatever you want to call it, to be the community gathering place? Or are we thinking that there's another recommendation here around a different facility?
Good question.
So I'm not necessarily suggesting that we take a view on that tonight, but if people want to just look at that recreation section, it's about 3 or 4 pages, and I've separated out the comments into recreation facility and community gathering, so you can, I think, fairly easily get a sense of how people are kind of visualizing this. But I do think it's something we probably need to come back to. And that's a kind of a segue into the sense of community. So, active, vibrant downtown was, people were like describing it in real detail as to what they were looking for. And I went back to the sense of community recommendations, and I think we've got all of the items in there, but I think we may want to try and wordsmith those recommendations a little bit more. So Julie, I don't know whether that's something you and I could take a quick look at some point. I don't know how busy you are.
Very busy, but that's definitely, I would definitely make some time to work with you on that. Absolutely. That would be great. We've got, we've made some, I think we're making some good progress. It continues to be one of our priorities. And absolutely. I can connect with you offline and we can set up a time to talk.
That would be great.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah. Okay, what else? And then funding. There's a bit of a split in the funding section between people that, were making comments about how do we increase revenue, how do we collect more taxes, particularly from, if we get more commercial businesses into the town, then we get more tax revenue from them. But there was a little group there where people were saying, well, maybe we shouldn't be thinking about increasing taxes. We should be looking at improving our cost control and taking costs out and reducing taxes. So, again, nothing kind of earth-shattering. I just think it's something we probably just want to, Sam, maybe, I think some of those recommendations were yours. Maybe this is a good time to kind of go back and look at those recommendations again, maybe try and just hone them in a little bit.
Yeah. I think it's hard to save our way to significant additional revenue, frankly.
Yeah.
There is probably some fat in town government. On the other hand, it's not, 50% worth or whatever. And I think there's a lot of built-in inflation relative to salaries, which are a huge portion of the cost, particularly in the schools, that it's hard to get around. We're not going to change the collective bargaining agreements substantially. And so that doesn't leave a lot of room to save money.
Mm-hmm.
you got simultaneously, I think people's expectations for various public services continue to rise. So it's hard to find your way through that to any significant savings so you can cut taxes significantly. So it's a real problem. I don't think there's an easy answer. And I think one of the things I was suggesting was that you look at the commercial tax base along Route 9 to find ways to encourage development and businesses to move in there and have taxable assets that we can generate revenue from. And that to me is the most likely hope for additional revenue in any significant way.
Is there a reason? Have we done, I mean, I know that there's a committee, a business development committee. Do we know why our section, I feel like I drive down Route 9 in Southborough and there's vacancies. I mean, I don't know exactly. Have we seen, my question is, have we seen a significant amount of business leave Southborough in recent times? And do we know why that is?
Julie is the EDC representative. She can.
Yes, that is something that the EDC tracks, and it's and there's only so much that we can do about it. And a couple of bigger companies that had been with us have left for different reasons, and we're always in touch with them when that happens.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just we don't have the right. There was one big company, for example, called Globoforce that was in one of the buildings on Route 9. And they were happy there. They loved it. They were just looking for bigger space, and we didn't have bigger space. So they ended up just over the border. You can actually see their insignia in Framingham up at the corner of the Staples Center now. So that was a loss for us. There's that big building, if you're heading west on Route 9, that a company called Kaz was there for a long time. They left a few years ago, and we just have not been able to replace them. And the landlord's not local, and he's not interested in negotiating or doing a lot of work to make it a more viable space. And some of the space, just when it was built, it's not, brand new space. So it takes a lot of work. And in general, it ebbs and flows. And there were sort of trends prior to COVID of businesses wanting to be closer to cities where talent pools were. So that's just something that those office spaces are grappling with. And obviously the landscape is really interesting. That could be a whole separate segment. That's not.
So that's what I was going to say. So in like a post-COVID world where, most people are working remote now, or at least, companies are trying to make that happen for their employees. I mean, theoretically they'll need a lot more computer power to do that. Would it be, again, this is a weird suggestion, but using the vacancies that we have to maybe market to, companies who are looking to put giant computer servers places, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think
filling the building.
We're not opposed, that hasn't been opposed to. I know there have been suggestions of that, but what it actually makes me think about is something that Kristen Laval was talking about earlier. There's a limited number of space for recreational facilities, and yes,
right.
Route 9 may not be the best space for an outdoor field or a pool, but it might be a space for some sort of indoor option. There's been some interesting talk. We've been in touch with a woman about a year ago now, and obviously things are on hold because of COVID, who is she wants to put in a women-centered sports facility, and she's on this huge mission. She started this company, she's raised a ton of funds to put in a huge sports complex focused on women's sports, and she has a business plan to market throughout the country. Again, it's in very early stages. Who knows what will happen? She loves Southborough as a location because of its proximity to some of the major routes, regionally, to bring sports teams from across the state and across New England. So I think that's really smart to be thinking about those in different ways. Again, these are all privately owned buildings mostly, so the town only has so much sway over it, but in putting together a plan and a vision, we can set the things in place to encourage and foster those sorts of potentially redevelopment if office space isn't going to be the wave of the future. And we have on the Economic Development Committee, we have one member who's an analyst who kind of studies trends and markets and everything. And she's reported that, there's a little bit of a pendulum swing back, where now that people have been out of the offices for 8 months, there's a little bit of like, oh, that was actually, we kind of missed some of that. And there's some collaboration and stuff that you can't quite do at home. So I don't think offices are over, but there's definitely going to be a decrease in the need for office space for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And Julie, I'd add too that I've heard it suggested that the type of space that people are interested in leasing now is a little different than it's been historically.
Mm-hmm.
And we've seen some of that. There is a building that's being remodeled. I think it's on Route 9 near Shrubs and Trees over there, where some folks came in, bought the building. They're reconfiguring it as a workspace kind of place with small offices to rent out to people who may be working remotely but don't want to work remotely at home, so they want to go someplace local.
Exactly. Yeah, like the WeWork model, which
have
we
an
work
office.
aside. Yeah, I agree. You need some, you might need some meeting space, or you might need some level of office services. You might need printers or coffee machines that you don't have at home, or just space away from your children or something for a few hours. And so yeah,
I'll take one.
That's right. Sold. But as we maybe reconfigure a little bit in that direction, it might open up some opportunities. So
yeah. And again, I think it's putting together the vision, and then I know in Marlborough, for example, they had put together in their plan a very specific vision of what they wanted, to the point where the town was advertising like, hey, we want this business, we want this specific business, and putting out incentives and RFPs to try to bring the types of businesses in that they wanted. I mean, it's we're obviously not Marlborough, but there are things that we can do as a town to encourage certain types of businesses to come along.
Is there any kind of business in particular that we would want
on Route 9?
You guys have identified?
Well, I don't know that answer for sure, but I know one thing in some of the analysis that EDC's done, we have a pretty diverse body of business sectors, they're called. It's like an economic breakdown of what kinds of businesses there are. And we're lucky that we've got a lot of biotech and things like that, and science-based businesses. And again, like lab space, that's something that's clearly not going to go away. You can't do your lab work from home. So, and having some of those businesses obviously creates opportunity for more of those kind of businesses to come in. So yes, I don't know more than that, and but I think that's something that kind of caters, from the analysis we've done, to the talent pool that we have locally as well. But that all plays into, I know that one of the reasons that a lot of businesses have left, or one of the complaints that we've heard in the EDC, is that in the Metro West area, they sometimes struggle to attract talent, and part of that is tied into housing options. So if you're 28 and just got your PhD, and you are looking for a job, you might not want to move to a 4,000 square foot home for $950,000 in Southborough.
I'm telling you, tiny houses, they're sustainable, they're cheap to build, people can buy them.
Yeah, I
little
hear
community.
You. And that's why, when we're talking about the downtown area, we're trying to figure out ways to incorporate housing that with all of the, we received similar responses in our survey. We know that there's some sort of, some people in town are very opposed to non-single family homes, but for lots of reasons, for affordability, for diversity, for allowing people as they age to stay in town, for allowing young people to come in town and start families, having that diversity of housing is really key. And it also fits into the, to what people are looking for, is to be walkable, to be close to a restaurant or a coffee shop or a brew pub or something. And along with having the, trails and connectivity and those amenities too. So I think that translates downtown. I think that translates to Route 9, because, like I said, a lot of those businesses are looking for the same amenities that residents are.
For sure.
And Gina, I think that's what Southville used to be when the factories were down there, and factory housing along there, very small. Houses, right near
they built them. They were building railroads, and you see a ton of them in New York and in Brooklyn, and all of these little houses. They're connected because it's New York, but
Bring back the factories.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so that was, as I said, that's the analysis. I can follow with people individually like Karen and Kristen and Julie, but if you get a chance, just take a look at some of the comments. There's a, you know, there are definitely some interesting points in there.
Very
good.
helpful, Judith. And again,
Thank you so
very
much,
more
Judith.
informative than the prior summaries I'd seen of that data. Quick sidebar to Tom's earlier point. I did a quick look at the math. Something like for a population of 10,000, something like a 95% confidence interval plus or minus 5%. You need about 400.
That's the number, 400?
Roughly 400, yeah. So we're close.
So I should just clarify that 316 is the number of individual comments,
Yep.
not necessarily the number of people that responded to that survey.
Yeah, I think it was over. I think it was very close to 400 or maybe over.
Yeah.
So you're in the ballpark.
Mm.
Again, unless there was some crazy bias there where, you know, nobody more than 10 years old showed up to fill it out.
Probably pretty representative.
I responded 18 times myself. So
Well, we all know
Fake
Tom
news.
responded
Fake
39 times with the pool.
yes, right. Judith, did you check the handwriting on the pool requests?
I used both hands.
I was gonna say right with the right hand or the left hand.
20 with one
Kids
hand
do
handwriting,
it.
19 with the other handwriting. Very suspicious.
Thank you, Judith. I was wowed again
Thank
on
you.
another
Thank you.
Yes.
Great
Yes,
work.
awesome.
fabulous
Really
document.
good.
Are you going to post that on the Dropbox?
It is, yeah. I did.
You know, it is.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I have not had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting. So would anyone mind if we put those off to approve till the next meeting?
That's fine with me.
That's fine.
Me.
Is there anything else that any members want to discuss? I don't have anything under chair reports.
What's the plan for next meeting?
So the tentative date is December 16th. Is that okay?
Works for me.
You know, I think what I'm going to suggest for the next meeting. We're going to have the fleshed out schools. We're going to have rec. We've got 2008 carry forward. So I'm going to propose that I can update not the really long document. I mean, I update that anyway, but it's really hard to review, but the individual documents, kind of, it was 1 page per objective that I did 2 or 3 meetings back. I'm going to update those, and then Mary, we can actually go through and say, do we feel that these are the final goals and recommendations that we want to say, right, that's what we're going to be working to incorporate in a final report, and then we can start the implementation planning bit from there. Does that sound
Okay.
Sounds good.
That sounds like a really good plan, Judith.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last 2 meetings, because we managed to get such a great, you know, attendance as well. I think we've had some really good conversations here. And I think if we can just keep that, you know, going for the next meeting as well, I think that will be pretty much there in terms of those recommendations and goals for that point.
And we filled in some
I just want to
important
mention,
missing
I'm
pieces.
sorry, go ahead. I just want to mention that there's a school committee meeting the night of the 16th, December 16th. It's a combined meeting, so it starts at 6. So I possibly would be able to do both. I just never know how long they're going to go, especially these days. So
We could always do the 23rd. Nobody's going anywhere for Christmas. Should we stick with the 16th? And
I thought we said the 17th.
Oh, my God. 16th.
Oh, I wrote down the 17th.
16th is Wednesday. If that works, that would be good. Yeah.
Yeah, that works for me.
okay.
We can try and put schools on at the end. We'll put you on about 10:30, Katura, is that right?
Just when she's full of energy.
Oh,
Listen, to me, I feel like anything after, after 7 may as well be midnight. So it's fine.
I feel you on that one.
Okay, awesome. Great job, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yes.
So I just
Thank
want to make an
you.
announcement. The Boston Celtics has drafted at the number 14 slot, Aaron Nesmith out of Vanderbilt.
Mm,
Bill, huh?
just what I was expecting.
He's a power forward, just in case anybody was interested.
Power forward, huh?
I'm about to turn it on right
Motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a
That's
second?
Andrew's role, second. Yes.
Ah,
Okay.
Latrell, yes. Watson? Signs?
Yes.
Stivers?
Extra yes.
Mills?
Yes.
Markalier?
yes.
Glazemitsky?
Yes.
Connolly?
Yes.
Savidovich?
Yes.
McKee?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
You guys too.
Happy